Taman stared at the holographic message floating above his desk, his eyes widening with excitement. The golden letters shimmered in the air, formal and impressive. It was an official invitation from the Galactic Community Council, and it had his name on it. The annual Galactic Pet Exhibition requests the honor of your presence, he read aloud, his voice filled with wonder. All participants are encouraged to bring their most cherished animal companion to demonstrate the beautiful bonds between species across the galaxy. End quote. He had only been part of the human delegation for 3 months, working as a xenobiologist on the massive orbital station called Harmony Vale. Every day brought new surprises, new alien species to meet, and new customs to learn. But this was special. This was a chance to show the galaxy something truly human, something personal and meaningful. Taman turned in his chair and looked at the gray tabby cat sleeping on his bed. Bora lay curled in a perfect circle, her tail wrapped around her nose, completely oblivious to the universe around her. She had traveled with him from Earth, spending most of the journey in suspended sleep. Now, she spent most of her time doing exactly what she was doing right now. Sleeping. "What do you think, Bora?" Taman asked. "Want to go to a fancy alien pet show?" The cat's ear twitched, but she didn't open her eyes. Taman smiled. That was about as enthusiastic as Bora ever got about anything except dinner time. He looked back at the invitation and scrolled through the details. The exhibition would be held in the Grand Hall of Harmony Vale in 2 weeks. Species from 3 entire sectors would attend, bringing their companion animals. There would be demonstrations, presentations, and a celebration of the bonds between intelligent species and the creatures they cared for. At the bottom of the invitation, there was a small note in slightly smaller text. Please review the attached guidelines for approved companion species categories. Taman meant to click on it. He really did. But at that moment, his communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the biochemistry lab. There was a problem with the protein sequencer, and they needed his help immediately. He quickly accepted the invitation, made a note to prepare Bora's travel carrier, and rushed out the door. 2 weeks later, Taman stood in his quarters, carefully placing Bora into her transport carrier. The cat meowed in protest, clearly unhappy about being disturbed from her nap. I know, Taman said soothingly, scratching behind her ears. But this will be fun. You'll get to meet aliens. Lots of them. They'll probably think you're amazing. Bora meowed again, this time with a tone that suggested she thought Taman was an idiot. She settled into the carrier with obvious reluctance, turning around twice before sitting down with her back to him. The shuttle ride to the exhibition hall was short but exciting. Taman could see other ships arriving, each carrying delegates from different species. Through the windows, he caught glimpses of aliens he had never seen before. Tall ones, short ones, ones that seemed to be made of crystal, others that floated in spheres of liquid. When the shuttle docked, Taman carefully lifted Bora's carrier and followed the signs to the Grand Hall. The corridors were decorated with flowing banners, showing different animals from across the galaxy. He noticed that most of them looked rather gentle, with large eyes and round features. Many appeared to be herbivores, creatures that ate plants rather than meat. The entrance to the Grand Hall took his breath away. It was a massive dome made of transparent crystal, offering a stunning view of the stars beyond. Inside, hundreds of platforms and pedestals were arranged in careful rows, each one hosting an alien and their companion creature. A tall, bird-like alien approached him with quick, precise steps. Her feathers were a beautiful mix of blue and green, and her large eyes blinked in a way that seemed friendly. A small device on her collar translated her chirping voice into words Taman could understand. Welcome, welcome. I am Kristha, of the Lixian delegation. You must be the human representative. How exciting. Her whiskers, which appeared to be made of some crystalline substance, vibrated with enthusiasm. What gentle companion have you brought to share with us today? Taman smiled and lifted the carrier slightly. This is Bora. She's a cat, very friendly and calm. Spends most of her time sleeping, actually. A cat, Kristha repeated, seeming to test the word. How wonderful! I cannot wait to see her. Please, follow me to your assigned platform. We have it prepared with comfortable cushions and display information. As they walked through the hall, Taman observed the other companions on display. One alien proudly showed off what looked like a floating ball of glowing algae. Another had a small, six-legged creature that appeared to be eating colorful leaves from a bowl. A third had what seemed to be a patch of singing moss that hummed in pleasant harmonies. Everything looked very peaceful, very gentle, very safe. Taman began to feel a small knot of worry in his stomach, though he couldn't quite explain why. They reached his platform, a raised area with soft blue cushions, and a holographic display ready to show information about Earth and human culture. Krista clasped her hands together excitedly. The exhibition will begin in just a few minutes. We are so pleased to have humanity represented this year. Now, let me see this cat of yours. I am certain she must be adorable. Taman set the carrier down and knelt beside it. Through the mesh door, he could see Bora sitting calmly, her green eyes half closed. She looked utterly bored. She's very docile, Taman assured Krista. She won't cause any trouble. She mostly just sleeps and eats and asks for attention. That sounds perfectly lovely, Krista said, leaning closer with interest. Taman opened the carrier door. Bora sat there for a moment, considering her options. Then, with the slow deliberation of a cat who has just woken up, she stretched. Her front legs extended forward, her back arched, and her mouth opened in an enormous yawn. Her fangs caught the light from the crystal dome above, sharp and white and very clearly visible. Krista's crystalline whiskers made a sound like breaking glass. She stumbled backward, her large eyes growing even larger. Predator, she whispered. Then, much louder. Predator. The word echoed through the grand hall like a gunshot. Hundreds of alien heads turned toward them. Conversations stopped. The pleasant humming of the singing moss cut off abruptly. Bora, completely unaware of the panic she had caused, stepped out of the carrier and sat down on the cushion. She began washing her face with one paw. Utterly content, Taman looked around at the frozen aliens, at their expressions of shock and horror, and finally understood with terrible clarity that he had made a very, very big mistake. The silence lasted only a moment before chaos erupted throughout the grand hall. Aliens scattered in every direction, some running on legs, others flying with wings, and a few simply teleporting away in flashes of light. The floating algae balls dropped from their displays and rolled away. The six-legged herbivores stampeded toward the exits, knocking over carefully arranged platforms. Taman stood frozen in the center of it all, watching Bora calmly lick her paw. The cat seemed perfectly relaxed, as if the screaming and panic around her was no more interesting than a boring afternoon at home. Everybody, please remain calm. A loud voice boomed through the hall's speakers, translated into multiple languages simultaneously. Security protocols have been activated. Please evacuate in an orderly fashion while we assess the threat level. Threat? Taman said to no one in particular. She's not a threat. She's just a cat, but no one was listening to him. Krista had disappeared somewhere in the crowd. Most of the other aliens had either fled or were pressing themselves against the far walls of the hall, as far from Taman's platform as possible. A group of security drones descended from the ceiling, their cameras and sensors all pointed directly at Bora. The cat noticed them for the first time, and her pupils dilated with interest. Her tail began to twitch. Taman recognized that look. It was her hunting expression, the one she got when she saw birds through the window. Bora, no, he said firmly, scooping her up before she could pounce on the expensive security equipment. She squirmed in his arms and let out an annoyed meow. The drones backed away slightly, and Taman heard their sensors beeping rapidly. A tall figure strode through the panicking crowd with remarkable grace. The alien was bird-like, similar to Krista but much larger, with deep purple feathers that seemed to shimmer with authority. A golden sash across his chest marked him as someone important. I am Velthar, Exhibition Overseer, the alien announced, stopping at what he clearly considered a safe distance from Taman, his large eyes fixed on Bora with an expression that looked like a mixture of horror and fascination. Human delegate, you have brought an apex predator into a peaceful gathering. Explain yourself immediately. Taman hugged Bora closer to his chest. The cat, sensing his nervousness, began to purr. The sound rumbled through the quiet hall, like distant thunder. Several aliens gasped. One fainted. She's purring, Taman tried to explain. It means she's happy. It's a good sound. That is a threat display, Velthar said, his feathers puffing up. We have heard recordings of Earth predators making such growls before attacking. End. Velthar. 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 No. No. You don't understand, Taman said desperately. Cats are domestic animals. We keep them in our homes. They live with us. They're companions. Just like all these other animals here. You live with predators? Velthar's translator seemed to struggle with this concept. In your dwellings? Where you sleep? Yes, of course. Millions of humans have cats. They're very popular pets. Another alien, this one covered in soft fur and standing on 4 legs, spoke up from behind a pillar. But it has forward-facing eyes. That means it is a hunter. And those claws, those are weapons. As if to demonstrate the point, Bora stretched in Taman's arms, extending her claws and flexing her paws. The security drones retreated another meter. They're retractable, Taman said weakly. She mostly uses them for scratching posts. Scratching posts? Velthar repeated. Yes, we give them special posts to scratch. It keeps their claws sharp and… Oh, that's not helping, is it? A new voice called out from the entrance to the hall. Doyun ran toward them, carrying what appeared to be a small tree in a pot. The human botanist looked stressed, his usually neat hair sticking up in different directions. He stopped next to Taman and stared at Bora. Is that your cat? Doyun asked. Yes, this is Bora. You brought a cat to an alien pet show. The invitation said to bring my most cherished animal companion. Doyun closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Taman, did you read the guidelines? The ones attached to the invitation? Taman felt his face grow hot. I meant to. I got called to the lab and I forgot, and I just assumed. You assumed that aliens who evolved from prey species would be fine with Earth predators? I didn't know they evolved from prey species. Nobody tells me these things. Velthar cleared his throat loudly. Humans. I must insist that you contain this creature immediately. If it is not secured within the next 60 seconds, we will be forced to implement defensive measures. Taman quickly carried Bora back to her carrier. The cat resisted, clearly wanting to explore this interesting new place with all its unusual smells and sights. He managed to get her inside and close the door, though she immediately pressed her face against the mesh and meowed pitifully. There, Taman said. She's contained. The damage is already done, Velthar said stiffly. Half the participants have evacuated. The exhibition is ruined, and you, human delegate, are in serious violation of Galactic Safety Protocol 847, subsection 12, the prohibition of unregistered predators in civilian spaces. But she's not unregistered. She has all her vaccination records from Earth. That is not the same thing, Velthar said. His feathers were slowly smoothing down, but he still kept his distance. This is a serious matter. The council will need to convene an emergency hearing. Doyun set down his potted tree and stepped closer to Taman. Look, this is clearly a misunderstanding. Taman is new to galactic culture. He didn't know. Ignorance is not an excuse, Velthar said, though his tone was slightly less harsh. However, I acknowledge that humans are still learning our ways. The hearing will determine the appropriate consequences. Velthar, in her carrier, Bora had given up meowing and was now grooming herself, licking her paws and wiping them over her ears. Several aliens who had been cautiously returning to the hall saw this and immediately fled again. "Why do they keep running?" Taemin asked. "She's literally just cleaning herself. They see a predator displaying weapons and practicing hunting behaviors," Doyun explained quietly. "To them, every innocent thing Bora does looks threatening." Taemin looked around the grand hall at the overturned displays, the abandoned companion creatures wandering, confused and alone, and the security drones still hovering overhead. The beautiful celebration of interspecies bonds had become a disaster zone, and it was entirely his fault. "I'm sorry," he said to Velthar. "I truly didn't mean to cause any problems. I just wanted to share something important from human culture." Velthar studied him for a long moment. The alien's expression was difficult to read, but something in his posture softened slightly. "I believe you, human Taemin," he said finally. "But belief in your good intentions does not change what has happened here today. The council will meet tomorrow at dawn station time. You will attend, and you will bring documentation about this cat creature, and why humans feel it is safe to keep such animals. I'll be there," Taemin promised. As Velthar walked away to deal with the chaos, Doyun put a hand on Taemin's shoulder. "For what it's worth," the botanist said, "I brought a bonsai tree because I was worried about cultural differences. You know what the alien next to me brought? Singing moss." Singing moss. Despite everything, Taemin found himself laughing. It was a slightly hysterical laugh, but it helped. In her carrier, Bora yawned again, curled into a ball, and went to sleep. Completely unconcerned about the diplomatic incident she had caused, the arbitration chamber was nothing like Taemin expected. He had imagined something dark and intimidating, but instead, he found himself in a circular room with walls that displayed slowly moving images of peaceful landscapes from various worlds. 7 raised platforms surrounded the center, each holding a member of the Galactic Council. All of them kept a noticeable distance from the middle of the room, where Taemin stood alone. Bora's carrier sat beside him on a sealed platform. The cat was visible through the transparent material, sleeping as usual. Even unconscious, she seemed to make the council members nervous. Velthar stood at one of the platforms, his purple feathers neat and formal. "This hearing will now begin. Human Delegate Taemin stands accused of 3 violations: reckless endangerment of civilian populations, violation of predator protocols, and causing psychological distress to 47 registered individuals." Taemin swallowed hard. When put that way, it sounded terrible. The door to the chamber opened, and a human woman walked in with confident steps. She wore a sharp black suit and carried a datapad under her arm. Her hair was pulled back in a professional style, and she had the kind of expression that suggested she had seen everything and was not impressed by any of it. "Mireille Han, legal counsel for the human delegation," she announced, taking her place beside Taemin. She leaned over and whispered, "Don't say anything, unless I tell you to." "You're my lawyer?" Taemin whispered back. "Unfortunately," Mireille said, though there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Though, I have to admit, this is the most interesting case I've handled in months." One of the council members, a being that looked like it was made of flowing water, held in a transparent suit, spoke in a bubbling voice. "Does the defense acknowledge the facts of the case? The human did bring a predator to a civilian gathering?" "We acknowledge that Taemin brought his pet cat to the exhibition," Mireille said clearly. "However, we dispute the characterization of this action as dangerous or threatening. On Earth, cats have been domesticated for approximately 10,000 years. They are common household companions. Domesticated predators?" Another council member, this one resembling a large insect with delicate wings, clicked in disbelief. "Such a thing is impossible." "Clearly not impossible," Mireille said smoothly. "Since humans have done it successfully for millennia, we have documentation, genetic records, and billions of examples of peaceful coexistence between humans and cats." Velthar gestured toward the carrier. Yet this creature has all the physical characteristics of an apex predator. Forward-facing eyes for tracking prey, retractable claws for gripping and killing, sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. How can you claim it is harmless? Before Mireille could answer, another door opened. A woman with glasses and a tired expression entered, carrying several data pads and what looked like holographic projectors. Professor Sujin Kwan, xenoanthropologist, she introduced herself. I'm here to provide expert testimony about Earth's evolutionary history and the human-animal bond. Mireille smiled. Perfect timing. Sujin set up her equipment and activated the first hologram. It showed a rotating image of Earth, with various animals highlighted across its surface. Earth is what we call a high predation world. Sujin began. Unlike many planets in the galactic community, Earth's ecosystem developed with significant predator-prey dynamics. Humans evolved in this environment. She changed the hologram to show a human figure, then zoomed in on the face. Humans themselves have forward-facing eyes, a trait we share with predators. We evolved as omnivorous hunters, using persistence and tool use to track prey over long distances. The chamber erupted in shocked chirps, clicks, and bubbles. The insect-like council member stood up from its platform. You are saying humans are predators? Technically, yes, Sujin said calmly. We are omnivores, which means we eat both plants and meat. Our ancestors hunted animals for food for millions of years. Taman watched as several council members exchanged worried looks. This was not going the way he had hoped. Velthar's feathers puffed up slightly. This is highly disturbing information. Why were we not told about this when humans joined the galactic community? It was in our biological profile, Mireille said. Perhaps some details were overlooked during the integration process. The water-being council member rippled with agitation. If humans are predators, and they keep predatory animals as companions, what does this say about their nature? Should we be concerned for our safety? No, Sujin said firmly. And this is the important part. Humans evolved past simple predation millions of years ago. We developed empathy, cooperation, and the ability to form bonds with other species, including species we once hunted. This is actually quite remarkable from an evolutionary standpoint. She changed the hologram again, showing images of humans throughout history with various animals. Dogs, cats, horses, birds. Humans have domesticated dozens of species. We take potentially dangerous animals and, through generations of selective breeding and socialization, turn them into companions. Dogs were once wolves. Horses were once wild and untamable. And cats, despite their hunting instincts, became beloved household members. But why? The insect council member asked. Why would you want to live with creatures that could harm you? Taman found himself speaking before Mireille could stop him. Because they're not just safe, they're wonderful. Everyone turned to look at him. Mireille gave him a warning look, but didn't stop him. Bora isn't dangerous, Taman continued, his voice gaining confidence. She's my friend. She sleeps on my bed. She sits with me when I'm sad. When I'm stressed about work, petting her makes me feel calm. Yes, she has claws and teeth, but she's never used them to hurt me. She's gentle and sweet, and I love her. The chamber was silent. Several council members looked uncomfortable with the emotional speech. Then something unexpected happened. Bora woke up. The cat stood and stretched in her carrier, then pressed her face against the transparent wall, looking directly at Taman. She meowed, a small, plaintive sound that the translation devices couldn't properly interpret. Taman walked over to the carrier without thinking. It's okay, Bora. I'm here. Do not open that container, Velthar warned. But Taman wasn't going to open it. He simply placed his hand against the transparent wall, and Bora pressed her head against it from the other side. Pushing as if trying to reach him, she meowed again, louder this time. She's calling for you, the water being said quietly. She's not calling as a predator, Mirai said, seizing the moment. She's calling because she's bonded to Taemin. Because despite what her biology says, she loves him. That's what domestication means. That's what the human-animal bond is about. Sujin pulled up another hologram. This one showing brain scans. When humans interact with their pets, we release oxytocin, the same hormone involved in maternal bonding and friendship. Our brains literally recognize these animals as family, and studies show that cats and dogs have evolved to bond with humans in the same way. The insect council member tilted its head. The predator has feelings for the human? All animals have feelings, Sujin said. But domesticated animals have specifically evolved to connect with humans emotionally. They're not just safe because we control them. They're safe because they genuinely care about us. Velthar was quiet for a long moment, staring at Bora and Taemin. The cat was still pressed against the wall of her carrier, her eyes half closed, purring softly. This is difficult to understand, Velthar admitted finally. In our history, predators are monsters from ancient times. We evolved to fear them, to run from them. The idea of living with one, of loving one, is completely natural for humans, Mirai finished. And we believe that with proper education and cultural exchange, other species might come to understand this bond, even if they don't wish to participate in it themselves. The council members discussed among themselves for several minutes, their various languages mixing into a strange symphony of sounds. Finally, Velthar spoke. We are not prepared to make a final ruling today. However, we propose an alternative to punishment. Human Taemin, would you be willing to participate in a demonstration to show us, in a controlled environment, how this human-animal bond functions safely? Taemin looked at Mirai, who nodded slightly. Yes, Taemin said. I'll do whatever it takes to help you understand. Then we will reconvene in 3 days, Velthar announced. Prepare your demonstration. And Taemin, perhaps this time, read all the relevant documentation first. Despite the tension, Taemin found himself smiling. I promise I will. The demonstration arena was specially constructed in just 3 days. It sat in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by transparent barriers that the council assured everyone were predator-proof. Seating rose up in circles around the arena, and every seat was filled with curious aliens who had come to witness something unprecedented. Taemin stood in the center of the arena with Bora, who was investigating every corner with intense interest. She sniffed at the floor, batted at a loose thread on his jacket, and then sat down to wash her face. Normal cat behavior. But Taemin could see the aliens in the audience tensing at every movement. Mirai stood at the edge of the arena with a microphone, ready to narrate. Thank you all for attending today's cultural demonstration. What you're about to witness is a typical interaction between a human and their cat companion. Doyun sat in the front row with his bonsai tree on his lap. Next to him were 3 other humans who had volunteered to help with the demonstration. Jihoon, a security officer, had brought his German shepherd, which was currently resting peacefully at his feet but causing significant anxiety among the nearby aliens. Yoonji had brought a small hawk in a special carrier, and Minho had brought something in a tank that was covered with a cloth. Let's start simple, Mirai said. Can you show us how you interact with Bora during a normal day? Taemin nodded and sat down on the floor. Bora immediately walked over to him and rubbed against his side, purring loudly. He scratched behind her ears, and she pushed her head into his hand, demanding more attention. As you can see, Mirai narrated, the cat is initiating contact. This is a sign of affection and trust. She's not stalking Taemin as prey. She's seeking comfort and companionship. Taemin picked up a small toy from his pocket, a feather attached to a string. He wiggled it in front of Bora, and her pupils immediately dilated. Her body went low to the ground, her tail twitched, and then she pounced, catching the toy in her paws. Several aliens gasped. One stood up as if to run, but their companion pulled them back down. That was a predatory display, Velthar said from his seat near the front. His voice was uncertain. That was play, Taemin corrected gently. Watch carefully. If Bora was hunting for real, she would use her claws and teeth at full force. But look. He held out his hand, and Bora grabbed it with her paws, gently biting his fingers without breaking the skin. Her claws were out, but she wasn't pressing hard enough to scratch. She's controlling her strength, Sujin called out from her seat, where she had set up monitoring equipment. Domesticated cats learn as kittens to play without hurting their humans. They can bite hard enough to break bones, but they choose not to. Choice, the Water Being Council member said thoughtfully. The predator chooses not to harm. Exactly, Mireille said. And now, let's show you something even more remarkable. Jihoon stood up and walked to the arena entrance. The security barriers opened just enough for him and his dog to enter. The German Shepherd was large and powerful, with alert eyes and a mouth full of visible teeth. The audience erupted in nervous chatter. This is Max, Jihoon said calmly. He's a trained working dog. His ancestors were wolves, apex predators even more dangerous than cats. Max sat at Jihoon's feet, perfectly still, waiting for commands. His attention never wavered from his handler. Max can track criminals, detect dangerous substances, and protect people from threats. He has all the instincts of a predator, Jihoon continued. He gave Max a signal, and the dog immediately lay down, rolled over, and then sat up again. But he's also trained to follow commands, to control his instincts, and to be gentle. Angrain. Jihoon pulled a treat from his pocket and held it on his flat palm. Max took it with such careful precision that his teeth never touched the man's skin. The bond between humans and dogs goes back over 30,000 years, Sujin explained to the audience. Dogs were the first species we domesticated, and in return, they became our most loyal companions. They hunt with us, guard our homes, assist people with disabilities, and provide emotional support. A small Lixian child in the audience, sitting with what appeared to be their guardians, raised a hand timidly. Can I ask question? Velthar nodded to the child. Go ahead, young one. If predators are so scary, why aren't you scared? The child asked Jihoon. Jihoon smiled and knelt down next to Max. Because I trust him. And he trusts me. We've trained together, worked together, and spent years building our relationship. He knows I'll take care of him, and I know he'll never hurt me. To demonstrate, Jihoon lay down on the ground, completely vulnerable. Max immediately moved closer and rested his head on the man's chest, his tail wagging slowly. Even Velthar seemed moved by this display. His feathers smoothed down, and his posture relaxed slightly. Would anyone like to volunteer to observe more closely? Mireille asked, though she clearly didn't expect anyone to agree. To everyone's surprise, the Lixian child stood up. I want to try. Absolutely not, one of the child's guardians said immediately, pulling them back. But Velthar stood as well. Wait, perhaps this is exactly what we need. To truly understand, we must experience it ourselves. The exhibition overseer walked down to the arena, his steps slow and deliberate. Every alien in the audience watched in shocked silence as he approached the barrier. It opened for him, and he stepped inside, stopping several meters away from Taemin and Bora. What do I do? Velthar asked, his voice carefully controlled despite his obvious fear. Just sit down, Taemin said softly. Don't make sudden movements. Let her come to you if she wants to. Velthar lowered himself to the ground with grace, folding his long legs beneath him. His feathers were trembling slightly, an involuntary fear response he couldn't quite control. Bora, who had been distracted by the toy, suddenly noticed the new person. She turned her head and stared at Velthar with her green eyes. Then, with typical cat curiosity, she began walking toward him. She's approaching, Velthar said, his voice tight. What does this mean? She's curious about you, Taemin said. Just stay still. Bora walked right up to Velthar and sniffed his feathers. The alien froze completely, his eyes wide. Bora circled him once, her tail high in the air, and then did something that surprised everyone in the arena. She rubbed her face against Velthar's leg, marking him with her scent, and began to purr. The sound was loud in the quiet arena. Velthar's translator worked overtime to interpret the vibrations. "It's pleasant?" Velthar said, sounding surprised. "The sound is soothing. Purring is how cats show contentment," Taman explained. "She likes you." Slowly, hesitantly, Velthar reached down with one hand. His fingers touched the soft fur on Bora's head, and she pushed into the touch, purring louder. "It's warm," Velthar whispered. "And soft. I can feel the vibrations." For several minutes, the exhibition hall was silent except for Bora's purring. The bird-like alien, whose species had evolved to flee from predators, sat petting a cat and looking absolutely amazed. "I don't understand," Velthar said finally, looking up at Taman with confused eyes. "I should be terrified. Every instinct tells me to run. But this feeling, this is pleasant." "That's the bond," Sujin said quietly from her seat. "Your rational mind understands she's safe, and your emotional response is starting to override your instincts. That's the first step." The Lixian child spoke up again. "Can I try too?" "Two." This time, the child's guardians hesitated but didn't refuse. Mireille nodded to them. "We'll be very careful. I promise." The child came down to the arena, their crystalline whiskers trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Timon guided them to sit near Bora and explained how to let the cat approach on her own terms. Bora, sensing the child's nervousness, moved slowly. She sat down just out of reach and blinked at the child in what Taman knew was a cat's way of showing friendliness. "Blink back," Taman whispered to the child. Slowly, the child blinked. Bora blinked again and moved closer. Within minutes, the child was gently stroking Bora's fur, their fear replaced with wonder. "She's so soft," the child breathed. "And she's purring for me." Cameras captured everything, broadcasting the demonstration across the station and beyond. By the time Yunji brought out her hawk and Minho revealed his ball python, the audience was less frightened and more fascinated. As the demonstration ended and the volunteers left the arena, Velthar remained sitting on the floor, with Bora still purring in his lap. "I think," he said slowly, "we have much to learn from humans about fear, trust, and the bonds we can form with those we once thought were enemies." The audience erupted in a mixture of chirps, clicks, and bubbles that the translators interpreted as applause. 6 months had passed since the demonstration that changed everything. Taman walked through the corridors of Harmony Vale, carrying a datapad full of requests, applications, and meeting schedules. Bora trotted beside him on a leash, completely comfortable now with the station's environment. Aliens no longer fled at the sight of her. Some even stopped to ask if they could pet her. "Good morning, Taman," a Lixian researcher called out, waving enthusiastically. "Is today the day I can finally meet with you about adopting a cat?" Taman checked his schedule and winced. "I have you down for next week. I'm sorry, but we're completely booked right now. The waiting list is over 3 months long." The researcher's whiskers drooped with disappointment, but they nodded. "I understand. I'll keep waiting. I've been reading all the human materials about cat care. Did you know they need something called a litter box?" Fascinating. As Taman continued walking, he couldn't help but smile. The change had been slow at first, but after the demonstration footage spread throughout the galactic community, everything had shifted. What started as fear had transformed into curiosity, and curiosity had become fascination. He arrived at his office, a comfortable space that now served as the headquarters for the Interspecies Animal Therapy Institute. The nameplate on the door still looked surreal to him, even after months of seeing it every day. Inside, Heejin was waiting with her own datapad and an expression that suggested she had news. The veteran diplomat had returned from her assignment to find that her absent supervision had accidentally sparked a cultural revolution. "We have a problem," Heejin said. though she was smiling. A good problem. But still a problem. What kind of problem? Taman asked, setting Bora down. The cat immediately jumped onto his desk and settled into the sunbeam, streaming through the window. We have 57 more applications from aliens wanting to adopt Earth animals. 12 species are requesting dogs specifically. 23 want cats. And one very enthusiastic Quellan is asking if we have any tigers available. Taman laughed. Tigers? We're not giving anyone tigers. Tell them to start with something smaller. I already did. They've agreed to consider a hamster as a starter pet. The door opened and Velthar walked in, no longer wearing his formal exhibition overseer robes. He now dressed in simpler clothing and carried a small carrier. Through its transparent side, Taman could see a ginger kitten sleeping peacefully. Good morning, Velthar said. Sunshine had her veterinary appointment today. The human doctor says she's perfectly healthy and growing well. That's wonderful, Taman said. How are you adjusting to kitten energy? Velthar's feathers ruffled in what Taman had learned was the Quellan equivalent of an exasperated sigh. She climbed my curtains yesterday, all the way to the ceiling. I was told cats were graceful, but she fell off trying to jump to my bookshelf. That's normal kitten behavior, Heejin said, clearly trying not to laugh. Wait until she discovers the joy of knocking things off tables. She's already found that joy, Velthar said. But his tone was affectionate. Yesterday, she knocked over my collection of peace awards. All 7 of them. Despite his complaints, Velthar opened the carrier and gently lifted out Sunshine, holding the kitten carefully against his chest. The ginger cat immediately began purring and kneading her paws against his feathers. I never thought I would say this, Velthar admitted, but I cannot imagine my life without her now. She greets me when I come home. She sleeps on my bed. When I'm stressed about council meetings, petting her helps me calm down. Taman smiled. Those were almost the exact words he had used at the hearing 6 months ago. The fact that Velthar now understood them from experience felt like a victory. You're not alone, Heijin said, showing them her datapad. We're getting reports from across 3 sectors. The cultural shift is remarkable. There are cat cafes opening on Lixian colonies. Dog training programs starting on Quellan worlds. One aquatic species has even requested information about keeping otters. Though not everyone is happy about it, Taman added, thinking of the recent protests he had seen on the news feeds. The prey rights movement is gaining members. Change is always difficult, Velthar acknowledged. There are those among my people who believe we're betraying our ancestral fear, that we're putting ourselves in danger by accepting predators into our lives. I understand their concerns, even if I no longer share them. A communication alert chimed, and Heijin answered it. A holographic image appeared, showing Ambassador Council Member Threen, the Quellan official who had been most opposed to Taman at the hearing. I need to speak with Taman immediately, Threen said, his tone urgent. Taman felt a moment of worry. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. But I require assistance. It's personal. 20 minutes later, Taman found himself at Threen's residential quarters. The ambassador opened the door, looking tired and slightly disheveled, which was unusual for the normally pristine official. Thank you for coming, Threen said, stepping aside to let Taman enter. Inside the quarters, Taman saw the source of the problem. A small black kitten was perched on top of a tall bookshelf, meowing pitifully. Below, a middle-aged Quellan woman was standing with her hands clasped together, looking worried. This is my partner, Sarah, Threen introduced. And that is Shadow. We adopted her 2 weeks ago, and this morning she climbed up there, and now she's too frightened to come down. Taman couldn't help but smile. This is a very common problem. Do you have a stepladder? Will she attack if we try to reach her? Sarah asked nervously. No, she's just scared. Watch. Taman climbed the ladder they provided and gently picked up the kitten, who immediately clung to his shirt. He climbed down and handed Shadow to Sarah. who took her with careful hands. The kitten snuggled into her feathers and began purring. "I apologize for calling you for such a small matter," Threen said, though he looked relieved. "But I didn't know what to do, and Sarah was very worried." "Don't apologize," Taman said. "This is exactly what the Institute is for, helping people adjust to life with their new companions." "I must confess something," Threen said, sitting down on a cushion with unusual informality. "I was the most vocal opponent of your demonstration. I argued that humans were dangerous for bringing predators into civilized space. I believed you were either ignorant or reckless." "I remember," Taman said, though not unkindly. "I was wrong," Threen continued. "Not about the predator part. Shadow is certainly a predator, but about what that means. I've learned more about fear, courage, and trust in these 2 weeks with her than in all my years as a diplomat." Sarah sat beside him, still holding Shadow. "She sleeps between us at night. Sometimes she puts her paw on my face. Such a small gesture, but it means everything to me. I lost my daughter 3 years ago in an accident. Since then, I've struggled with grief. But Shadow, she gives me something to care for. Someone who needs me." Taman felt a lump in his throat. This was why he had wanted to share human culture in the first place. Not to cause chaos, but to share something beautiful. The days and weeks continued to pass. The Interspecies Animal Therapy Institute grew, adding more staff and expanding its programs. Ji-hoon started a dog training academy for aliens interested in working dogs. Eunji began teaching falconry to flying species who wanted to understand hunting partnerships. Minho opened a reptile education center for those curious about cold-blooded companions. Doyun still brought his bonsai tree everywhere, insisting it counted as a pet since he had named it and talked to it daily. No one argued with him anymore. The annual Galactic Pet Exhibition, now renamed the Galactic Companion Celebration, approached once again. This time, Taman walked into the Grand Hall without any fear or confusion. He knew exactly what to expect. The hall was transformed. Half the displays still showed traditional companions: floating algae balls, singing moss, gentle herbivores. But the other half showed something new. Aliens with Earth animals, carefully supervised and clearly proud of their companions. Aquelin demonstrated agility training with a border collie. Elixian showed off their rabbit, explaining that while it wasn't a predator, they had gained confidence through the program and now wanted to learn about prey species too. The aquatic species had indeed gotten an otter, which performed tricks for fish treats in a specially designed tank. And there, in the center of it all, was the young Lixian child who had volunteered during the demonstration. They were showing their own cat now, a sleek Siamese that they had named Brave. Velthar stood on the main stage with sunshine in his arms. The kitten had grown into a beautiful young cat, and she wore a small ceremonial sash for the occasion. "Welcome to the 2nd Annual Galactic Companion Celebration," Velthar announced to the gathered crowd. 1 year ago, this hall was the site of panic and fear. Today, it is a celebration of courage, growth, and the bonds that transcend our evolutionary histories. He paused and looked directly at Taman. "We owe this transformation to one human who simply wanted to share his love for his cat, who showed us that fear is not destiny, and that with patience and understanding, we can overcome even our deepest instincts." The crowd erupted in applause, properly translated applause this time, not panic. Taman stood with Bora in his arms, watching the celebration unfold around him. The cat, older now, and perhaps a bit wiser, surveyed the scene with her usual regal indifference. She had changed the galaxy without ever trying, simply by being herself. "You know," Mireille said, appearing beside him with a glass of alien beverage that tasted vaguely like mint. "You accidentally became one of the most influential humans in galactic history." "I just brought my cat to a pet show," Taman said, echoing words from months ago. "Exactly," Mireille laughed. The most human thing possible. Across the hall, a security alarm briefly sounded. A new Quellan cat owner was panicking because their kitten had climbed up someone's leg. Ji-hoon jogged over to help, demonstrating the proper technique for removing an overly enthusiastic kitten from sensitive areas. Velthar's voice came over the speakers, trying to sound official but clearly amused. Would the owner of the ginger kitten please retrieve your companion from Ambassador Waitar's ceremonial sash? No, Sunshine. We've discussed this. Not everything is a toy. I apologize, Ambassador. Taemin shook his head, grinning. The galaxy had changed. It was messier, louder, and far more chaotic than before, but it was also warmer, fuller, and filled with the sound of purring. Bora meowed, demanding attention as she always did. Taemin scratched behind her ears, and she closed her eyes in contentment. Around them, hundreds of aliens and their companions filled the hall, building bonds that would have been impossible just a year ago. And somewhere in the universe, another human was probably about to make another innocent cultural mistake that would reshape galactic society in unexpected ways. Because that, Taemin had learned, was what humans did best.